In the prequel to the 26th episode, we're learning about YA novels and previewing the perks of being a wallflower. Welcome back to This Film Is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. This is the prequel episode, which means we learn about a fun thing, and then we preview our next book/movie. Our topic, this is a viewer's choice, listener's choice for our next episode, and perks of being a wallflower one.
Yeah.
Beat out Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist and...
just barely beat out Nick and Nora by like one vote.
Yeah. And then what was the other one?
The Fault in Our Stars, which got way fewer votes than I thought it would.
I thought that one would have been the most... I would have thought that one would have won, honestly, because I thought the book was fairly popular. I mean, they all were, but yeah. So yes, the perks of being a wallflower, we'll preview that in a little bit, but as to the theme of the three books, we're going to learn about a thing, and that thing is young adult novels.
No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.
Yeah, so it's kind of a broad topic today, but I really wanted to talk about it so we could kind of orient ourselves within this genre and talk about what it is a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And we've sort of done an adjacent prequel learning things with the coming of age story.
Yeah, we talked about coming of age stories before Stand By Me.
Yeah, but I wouldn't necessarily classify Stand By Me as a YA.
No, I wouldn't classify it as a young adult novel.
Yeah, it's kind of a subset. Which one would you say is a subset of the other, or is it?
I would say coming of age is a subset of young adult.
Although the one we talked about wasn't a young adult, so
right.
There are some that coming of age stories that aren't young adult, that are kind of separate, I guess.
Well, yeah, and I'm calling young adult a genre. It's not really a genre in the same sense that, like, fantasy is a genre. It's a publishing genre.
Yeah.
The way that adult fiction or children's fiction are also publishing genres.
Yeah.
So you can have those kind of umbrella genres and then a lot of different things coming beneath them.
Yeah. So, young adult, what is it?
Well, young adult literature, it's a publishing genre, like I said, caters specifically to readers ages 12 to 18. That's maybe a little bit of a fuzzy classification, but I think that's how the publishing industry regards young adult. Yeah. 12 to 18-ish.
12 to 18, and I would say it's probably 12 to 18 of them reading it, but the stories... Because, like, so, not to get too far off from here, but, like, I think you could also classify... Because I think a lot of young adult fiction can be read to a younger audience.
Yes.
If you know what I mean. Like, they're obviously not old enough to necessarily read it and parse it themselves, but reading it, having it read to them, it still works, and it's not stuff that's, like, way above their pay grade.
Right.
As, like, a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old.
I mean, depending on the book. Yeah, depending on the book... You know, something like The Perks of Being a Wallflower, I probably wouldn't let my 7-year-old read.
Right.
But
there are some within that genre.
Right, something like the Babysitter's Club series is technically considered young adult. I read those when I was in the 2nd grade.
Right.
So.
And I was thinking specifically of Harry Potter, which I would classify as young adult, and I remember that was read to me when I was in 2nd grade.
And Harry Potter, I think, is a little bit of a special case because it does bridge children's and young adult.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, the first couple books I would say are more children's, and then they kind of grow up along with the protagonists.
Yes.
Anyway, we'll get there, ladies and gentlemen. So we mentioned this. A lot of times people do refer to young adult books as coming-of-age stories, sometimes also as problem novels or issue novels. We'll get into why a little bit later.
Okay.
Common themes in YA Lit include friendships, relationships, first love, identity, and more recently, diversity. Mm-hmm. We briefly talked about in our last prequel episode the genre of children's fiction, and the fact that it didn't really exist as a genre until around the turn of the century. Young adult fiction was even later to the party. It didn't get its own proper category until quite a bit later. Modern classification of young adult literature started in the 1950s and the 1960s, especially after the publication of S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders, which I can't believe you've never read.
Nope. We've discussed this, but it's
mind-boggling.
It's just
to me.
the classes I was in, I had some weird... Again, I was in a lot of and you were too, but like a lot of the advanced English classes, and in those our teachers got to pick, and they often didn't pick the standard
You're literally the only person I know who didn't have to read that in school. Anyway, moving on. The Outsiders was wildly popular, so it really helped to kind of carve out a publishing niche specifically for young adults. So something that separates young adult fiction from adult fiction that might happen to be about teenagers, like Stand By Me, right? It's more adult, but it does happen to be about teenagers. Something that kind of creates a separation there is that YA lit lacks a nostalgic tone. It isn't about looking back or figuring out how the events of adolescence resulted in the current adulthood. Instead, teenager stories are allowed to simply exist on their own without having to take on that nostalgic quality that something like Stand By Me definitely has.
Yeah, because it's written for people going through that who wouldn't have a... young adult is written for an audience that is currently in...
you're
going
not,
through the young adult phase, thus they wouldn't be nostalgic about it yet.
Yeah, you're not being nostalgic about high school while you're in high school. So continuing on with our young adult timeline, the 70s and the 80s are considered the golden age of young adult lit. It was doing really well as its own market, and that was when we started to see a lot more mass-produced formulaic young adult series like The Babysitter's Club, which I mentioned earlier, and the Sweet Valley High books, stuff like that just kind of got churned out and people ate it up. But by the later 1980s, YA authors started to really push the envelope in terms of subject matter. They started writing about hot button and taboo issues like sex, rape, suicide, drug use, mental health, etc., etc. This is where we get the moniker problem novel or issue novel, right? Because they're addressing these kind of problems or issues that teenagers might face.
That also seems more in line with the same time period, and I could be wrong. I haven't watched a lot of 60s and 70s sitcoms and television shows, but I know the 80s and early 90s are very famous for their after-school special type of, what's the word for the episodes? A very special episode, exactly.
Yeah,
and that's around the same time where they TV shows also started addressing, in an episode here or there, those similar topics, drugs and sex and, that sort of stuff.
Much like those TV shows, I would imagine these more serious books did have their critics. But overall, this trend kind of resulted in YA literature maturing as a genre. It kind of came into its own a little bit more. So these days, young adult literature is just as much of an umbrella term as adult literature, as I mentioned earlier. It's still written and marketed with teenagers in mind, but you can find just about any other genre you want in the young adult section of a library or a bookstore. You can find romance, fantasy, sci-fi, speculative fiction. A lot of it is pretty literary, too. You can find pretty much anything you want.
What do you mean by literary, just that word, when describing a genre? What does that mean? I've never known. I don't know if I've ever heard it used just alongside sci-fi, fantasy, speculative, and literary.
All right, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to define literary fiction as the opposite of popular fiction. It's maybe a little more highbrow. It might have more complex themes, more complex stories. It might be written at a higher reading level. It might use more advanced vocabulary. Okay.
Interesting. I would have never thought of that as its own. To me, it was interesting seeing that categorized alongside of something like sci-fi, because am I wrong in saying that a romance, fantasy, or sci-fi novel could also be literary?
It definitely could.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding what that meant or was unaware. And so that makes sense. I got it. So that is young adult, the genre, the novel genre. There's obviously a very a similar film has reflected the young adult genre in the sense that millions of young adult novels have been adapted.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, it has gotten to the point currently where it has become it's sort of worn out its welcome a bit among some audiences in terms of I think that the young adult, there was such a boon of young adult books translated to film for a while there, right around the time of Hunger Games first one coming out, and we had a bunch of them, and a lot of them you probably haven't even heard of, but they're like the fifth wave and like all these had a ton of them, and people, I think they thought this is where the money was, and then it's sort of realized
and there was
really needed to be a big tentpole series that people actually cared about for that to work as well. And it wasn't just the genre.
It was a boom of even more specifically like dystopian young adult.
Yeah, that's
fiction.
true. There was a whole because of the Hunger Games. So you got the fifth wave and the Insurgent series, Maze Runner series. A handful of others that all around the same time blew up, and then people stopped going to see them. So, but again, those were just because I think it was people bandwagoning on the idea that look, Hunger Games made so much money,
right? And I think when a market gets oversaturated like that too, people have a hard time telling the separate properties apart.
If you asked me to differentiate, if you showed me a trailer and cut all of the any graphical element that would tell you what the movie was, if you showed me a Maze Runner trailer and an Insurgent trailer, I guarantee you I would not be able to tell you which.
Now hang on.
Sorry, I guess the Maze Runner one might have a maze in it,
right?
But they looked, I remember stylistically and visually they looked so similar. And like the characters all looked so similar that I just remember being like,
I mean, they were all trying to be the Hunger Games, right. Kind of like how after Twilight everything was trying to be Twilight. What
I want to do with this part of learning things with this film is lit is that I want to play a bit of a game. It has less to do with the young adult, but it kind of does because it's I thought it would be fun. I was looking at teen movies and movies made directly specifically for teens. And then I got into a thing where I was looking at the tropes that we see in teen movies. Yeah,
because teen movies just as big of a market as teen books.
Yes, and they go back just as far, and obviously all the way, all of John Hughes's catalog, and all the way back to at least the 60s, probably, if not further. What I wanted to do is I want to play a game. I went through and I found a list of. This is from the TV or movie tropes website that exists. I can't remember what it's called.
I love TV tropes.
Yeah, TV tropes. But they also do film, obviously.
It's a quality website worth your time.
So they had a whole list of tropes that are not exclusive to teen movies, but are very prominent in teen movies. And what I want to do, I want to go through them because I just thought it would be fun to kind of see the things that pop up a lot in teen films. And I'm going to read you the title of the trope.
Okay.
And then I want to see if you can figure out what the trope is. So the way TV tropes works is they give you there's the name of the trope.
They name their tropes.
And so I think you'll do okay, but I have like 10 of them.
Okay.
And I'm going to read you the title, and then I want to see if you can parse out, knowing that they're tropes from teen movies, and with the title, if you can figure out what the trope is.
I'm excited.
I think this will be fun. I thought it would be a fun game. The first one. Some of them are going to be very easy. Because some of them, the titles are kind of give it away, but not all of them. Dawson's Casting.
Dawson's Casting. Well, obviously that
or Dawson Casting, but no.
That has to do with Dawson's Creek, which I did not watch growing up.
Okay. Use your context clues here. Treat it like ACT. Remember, these are teen movie tropes.
Teen movie tropes. Is that where the teenagers are played by very clearly people in their 20s?
Ding, ding, ding.
Yes.
Dawson's Casting is casting much older actors to play teens. It's named for Dawson's Creek, like you said. In Dawson's Creek, James Vanderbeek was 20, Katie Holmes was 18, and Joshua Jackson was 19, and they're all playing 15-year-olds. In the pilot, they age up throughout the show, but... So, yeah. Also, Buffy famously.
Yeah.
Like, Xander is like 27 playing an 18-year-old or something like that.
Yay, labor laws.
Yeah. So that was the first one. That was one of the tougher ones. Like I said, some of these other titles get a lot easier.
Okay.
Like this one. All periods are PMS.
Okay. I think that probably has to do with the way that female characters behave when they're on their period, or maybe not even.
No, that's it. It goes a little bit further in that one, rarely ever see the physical effects of being on your period.
Right.
In teen movies and in teen, but the one thing you do see is, because it's a running gag, joke, cliche, trope, is that every time any girl gets her period, she PMSs and is moody and
right.
So yeah, exactly. So it's sort of the trope of is very not a very not only not a full portrayal of the menstrual cycle or whatever, but also a sort of misogynist one.
Yes, very much so.
All right, this one is great. It's one of my favorite ones. Carload of cool kids.
Oh, God. I mean, I think it's exactly what it sounds like when you're watching a movie and a carload of cool kids pulls up onto the screen. I mean, there are always in a car together, aren't they?
Yeah.
Mean Girls comes to mind specifically.
Yep. So specifically, that is what it is. Like I said, the title is pretty much what it is. But more specifically, it's when a large group of people are in a car, especially a convertible, and they drive by, very often stopping to talk or heckle somebody, to like yell or make fun of somebody. And it's a bunch of cool, like the jocks are all in the car with their girlfriends. And so that's Carload of Cool Kids. That was one of my favorite ones. This one, very obvious. Dating What Daddy Hates.
Ah, yes. When the girl dates the rebellious guy, or the guy she knows that her dad won't like, or that her parents won't like.
Yes, exactly. It is female characters dating boys who kind of personify all the traits that their father hates. Yeah, the cool guy, he smokes, he drives a cool car, and whatever. Bad boy. I like this one. Elaborate University High.
High spelled H-I-G-H?
Yeah, just all the words spelled normal.
Elaborate University High. Okay. So, I have two ideas here. The more maybe realistic one, I think, is when high school is portrayed, but it feels and looks a little bit more like a college.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
What was your other one?
My other thought was whenever, like, characters are depicted as, like, having taken drugs, and, like, it's really, like, super zany and
like,
kooky.
way over the top. Yeah. That's probably its own trope called, like, movie drunk or something like that, which is a problem I always have I always think it's so silly, where it's, like, whenever they show somebody drunk, they're just, like, falling, like, it's like they're, like, about to die of alcohol poisoning, but that's, like, yeah, anyways. So yeah, Elaborate University High it's when the high school campus looks more what you would expect of a very big, very expensive university, where, they have like a quad and like all these...
10 Things I Hate About You comes to mind. It's filmed in a huge building.
Yeah. Yeah, and the building, and a lot of times the grounds are very elaborate, and, they have like and sure, a lot of them probably are often set in nicer, maybe private schools or big high schools, but even still, it seems it's like, that's what my college campus looked like, not what my high school looked like. All right, 3 more. I like this one because this can be a problem often. Most writers are adults.
So, I mean, is this as simple as it sounds? Does it just refer to the fact that it's adults writing teen characters? And, and it's never going to truly be authentic, no matter what you do.
Yes. It's not that it's never truly going to be authentic, necessarily, but that yes, it is the idea that people writing these stories and the dialogue are adults. Because or at least almost always. I mean, occasionally, you'll find something where that was written by somebody that age. But what the problem where you see this, or the trope, is when you're watching characters and the stories and dialogues and emotions and the way the characters are played in teen movies are often the stories, dialogue, and emotions of much older people. Mm-hmm. Because it's adults that are writing those things.
Right.
And I know we liked the show a lot. Everything sucks. Yeah. But for at least the first few episodes, we noticed a lot that the dialogue between the three main boy characters very much felt like a table of comedy writers.
Yes.
Writing the jokes they wish their 11-year-old selves had been smart enough to make. Like, I was like, nobody talks like that at that age. Yeah. And so, it's stuff like that. That's, most writers are adults, so it's tough to feel there. All right, 2 more. We'll do this one because it's real easy. Wild Teen Party.
Ah, yes. That party.
Yeah. Classic Cars house party gets way too wild. Party crashers, fights, a rare family keepsake is destroyed. Mm-hmm. The police show up, something is on fire, everybody is dancing, and there are drugs.
Again, 10 things I hate about you comes to mind.
So my favorite one of that is the one where it's everybody's dancing. It's like, I don't know. I didn't go to a lot of parties, but like some people sometimes would dance. Most people just hung out. Yeah,
I didn't go to a ton of parties, but I went to my fair share of parties, I think. And I don't think I've ever been to a party where everyone was dancing.
No. All right, last one. And I like this one. I like the title. Recruit Teenagers with Attitude. This one you probably won't get. It's kind of tough. Recruit Teenagers with Attitude. Yeah. I'll give you a hint and say one of our more favorite TV shows, well, actually, probably several of our more favorite TV shows is guilty of this trope quite often. Or not quite often. It's sort of the premise of...
It's the word recruit that's throwing me off. Because
that is the important
with attitude.
The recruit is the important part, though.
Right. So is this the story where the teenager or the character that's tasked with saving the world or whatever?
No, I skipped that one. That's called Kid Hero. Okay. In theirs. Well, they have a couple that are very similar. What Recruit Teenagers with Attitude is when you're in a show or a movie where they're solving problems not by finding people qualified to solve the problems, but by sort of recruiting the nearest group of teenagers. So like Buffy.
Yes.
And The Flash. Although The Flash are qualified, I guess, and they're not teenagers, they're older. But... Yeah. I mean... To be fair, Buffy's qualified. Buffy is. Sorry, I meant Buffy the TV show. Sorry, I meant the rest of the people in Buffy. Not Buffy or Giles. I meant Xander and Willow, and eventually they become more qualified, but initially it's like... No, that's a fair assessment, yeah. Okay. And this is the teen version of assembling a ragtag team of misfits, basically. Oh, okay. It's kind of like the teen trope of that, where it's just get the nearest teens with that have interesting characters, and they're going to help save the world because they're there. So teens with attitude can accomplish anything. Yeah. All right. So that was all I had for that. That was a fun tropes. That we could continue that. Maybe do that game again in the future with a different genre or something. Because we should do that with like sci-fi and fantasy. Yeah. That would be fun. So we'll keep that in mind and do that in the future. Let's move along to our fun facts about the perks of being a wallflower.
Dear friend, I haven't really talked to anyone outside of my family all summer, but tomorrow is my first day, and I really want to turn things around this year.
Alright, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, published in 1999. Perks of Being a Wallflower is a coming-of-age novel by Stephen Chbosky. I looked it up. I found a little sound clip.
Is that how you say it?
Of him saying his... And it sounds like he's saying Chbosky.
Because I have to say it in a minute.
But the audio was not so great, so I hope I'm not mispronouncing it.
It's probably close enough.
But it sounds like Chbosky. It took him 5 years to write the novel. At the time, he was going through a bad breakup, and some of the themes of the novel sprung forth from that experience. Some of what happens is also supposedly inspired by his own high school experiences. think a lot of writers say that.
Yeah.
But all I can do is take his word for it.
Unless you're unless you went to high school with him, I don't know how you would ever know.
The book has been banned in some American schools. It addresses themes of sex, drug use, homosexuality, and mental health, and we all know how much Americans like those things in schools.
Yep. And discussing them.
So it does appear on the ALA's list of 10 most frequently challenged books. It made the top 10. Yeah.
I didn't know that about this. I mean, I knew that, like, sex and drugs, I knew that was a big thing in it, but...
I read it once before. I read it about 5 years ago, and I don't remember a ton about the plot, but I do remember it being fairly graphic.
Interesting. I had no idea.
So this is an epistolary novel.
I knew that because I saw that.
Talked about epistolary novels
we've already
before.
Talked about that.
It's framed around anonymous letters that Charlie, the protagonist, writes to an unnamed character. So I'm interested to see how the movie does or doesn't include that element.
Yeah.
Because we've kind of run the gamut.
Yeah.
We had like stuff like the Princess Diaries that kind of just dropped it. They abandoned it completely. And
Love Simon
and The Martian both found ways to incorporate it.
Yeah, Love Simon, you see him typing the emails and that sort of thing. And then in The Martian, he does video
they
blogs.
change it from diary entries to video blogs. Yeah. So I'm interested to see whether or not that element of the story makes it into the film version, because I've never seen the movie.
Me neither.
So the idea of those anonymous letters came from a real experience that the author had that I thought was kind of interesting. During his senior year of high school, Chbosky wrote an anonymous letter to Stuart Stern, the screenwriter of Rebel Without a Cause, about how the movie had influenced him. And a year and a half later, Stern found Chbosky and became his mentor.
Oh.
So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, that's nifty.
The book was a big success, sold more than 100,000 copies in its first year of publication. It's a New York Times bestseller, and it appears on NPR's list of 100 best ever young adult novels. I think we got a good one here.
Yeah, it's funny. Because it came out right in my young adult wheelhouse. I mean,
I didn't read it in high school.
Like, it would have gotten popular when I was 12 or 13.
Although maybe it was banned from my high school. I went to high school in a small town. It would not surprise me in the least.
Yeah, I don't imagine it would have been banned from mine, but I still, I don't remember ever hearing of it, or I don't know. I, for whatever reason, didn't.
So what are you going to do when you get out of this place?
I really want to be a writer, but I don't know what I'd write about.
You could write about us.
Call it Slut and the Falcon. Make us solve crimes.
All right, well, the movie facts are don't have a ton, but we have a few interesting ones. So it's a 2012 film. Took them a long time to get around to adapting it, 13 years. And it ultimately was written and directed by Steven Chbosky.
Yeah, I saw that when I was looking stuff up. I didn't know that he also directed it. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, he wrote. So this is the first time we've had where they both wrote and directed.
an
adaptation. We've had several where the person wrote.
Right. We had the Princess Bride and Gone Girl, where the author did the screenplay. And
where they were solely credited as the screenplay, because like Andy Weir wrote a lot of the he was credited, I believe, as a writer on the screenplay, but he had somebody else working with him. It was actually we won't get into it. But originally one of the reasons it took so long is that John Hughes read the novel and wanted to make it.
Oh.
He got the rights from Chbosky to write the screenplay, but he never finished it.
So it's sad in like development hell.
Kind of. It didn't really sound like so much development hell. It's just John Hughes was like really wanted to make it, and then he wanted it to be like his directorial comeback, kind of, because he hadn't directed in a while, and then he ended up having a heart attack in 2009. Well, in 2009, Chbosky may have had it back by then. I'm not sure. But so the version John Hughes, when he was writing this, the people he wanted to play the three main leads, at least who he said he had in his head, nobody was ever cast or anything like that. But for Charlie, the main character, he wanted Shia LaBeouf.
Oh.
Sam was going to be played by Kirsten Dunst. And now imagine he's probably adapting this in early 2002, 2003 maybe, so it makes a little more sense in terms of...
So pre-Transformers Shia LaBeouf, right?
Maybe pre... Maybe. I don't know what year Transformers the first one came out.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, it could be. He might have been looking at him more from because like iRobot I think was out at that point, and even Stevens and all that sort of stuff. So like maybe more of that was what he was. Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. I don't know what year Transformers came out.
I think Charlie's kind of an awkward character. And
Shia LaBeouf can 100% do awkward. I mean, even Sam Witwicky is kind of awkward. It's terrible that I know that character's name, but anyways, Kirsten Dunst is Sam, and now she obviously in a 2012 version she'd be like 30 something, so it wouldn't work at all. But and then Patrick Fugit. I don't know how to pronounce it. As Patrick. You know him from Almost Famous. He's like the main character in Almost Famous.
I've never seen that.
Okay. You also know him as in a movie we've done, Gone Girl. He is the partner of the main detective, the guy who's the partner.
Yeah. Huh.
That's him. He's been in a handful. He's been in a fair amount of stuff. His most famous role is Almost Famous. I think it was like one of his main lead roles. He's done a lot of like other like sort of character actory stuff. So the producers of Juno became interested and decided they wanted Chbosky to adapt it himself. The people who produced Juno, which include John Malkovich and a handful of other people. Chbosky liked about half of Hughes's screenplay that he had written for it, and so he bought the screenplay from the heirs or the estate of John Hughes and used like half of it, or incorporated like half of it, roughly according to what I found.
They ought to give him a screenwriting credit.
The not the Screen Actors Guild, the Screenwriters Guild and the Directors Guilds are all very stickler about. It's very strange how all those rules work. I don't know how all of them work, but they're very weird about who gets credit for what. So
interesting.
And he may, I don't know, but yeah. All right, Chbosky knew he wanted to cast Emma Watson once he saw her in Harry Potter and Half-Blood Prince. There's the scene where Ron breaks her heart and Harry consoles her. I don't know exactly which scene he's talking about, but Chbosky said, "She broke my heart in that scene. She's crying, and I just felt that she had all the vulnerability that Sam needed." And I don't know what this means, because I haven't seen the movie or read the book, but Emma Watson has admitted she refuses to watch her kissing scenes or the Rocky Horror Picture Show scene. So, I don't know what those are or what that means.
I mean, I could hazard a guess.
I mean, the kissing scene seems obvious, but like, I have no idea what the Rocky Horror Picture Show scene.
Have you ever been to a live showing of Rocky Horror? I remember that being an element.
I've never been to one, but I'm aware of what.
But
I'm aware of what that means.
So she's probably like in a costume dancing.
Oh, okay, sure. I don't know.
I remember that being in the book, but I don't remember specifically like what they did.
I just didn't know because it just said the Rocky Horror Picture Show scene, and I don't know. I was like, what could that? I mean, that could mean a million things. Like they were watching it, like what yeah, they go to a live show, sure, maybe that, or like maybe they did the musical in high school. I like it could be anything. Like I don't know.
That would be an awfully risque musical for a high school to do.
Fair enough, but that's all I got for the movie. So
all right.
Before we wrap it up, Katie's got one more thing that she would like to talk about. I may chime in once, not to argue, but just to push back a little, but then I want to do it very early just to kind of see what you have to say about it. And then after that, I'll let you wrap it up.
So the reason that I wanted to talk about young adult literature in this episode is because earlier today, a listener and a very close friend of mine, Lori, shout out to Lori, posted an article on our Facebook page. And this article was a kind of clickbaity hot take type of article. Basically what it said was that adults who read young adult literature should be ashamed because they're reading books written for children. If you would like to read that article, you should be able to find it on our Facebook page. It might be under the community tab.
It will be, I think.
Yeah, since it wasn't posted by one of us admins.
It's on Slate, too.
Okay,
It's on Slate. If you just go to Slate and look up, adults should be ashamed to read young adult or something like that, you'd probably find it pretty easy.
And this article bothered me because I hate book snobs. So I wanted to do a little PSA here.
Go for it.
For you guys. Guys, read whatever you want. You want to read young adult books? Do it. You want to read graphic novels and comics? Do it. You want to focus on the classics? Do it. You want to read the back of your damn shampoo bottle? Do it. Read. Read anything. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't or that you shouldn't, and don't walk around thinking that you're better than other people because of what you read. You are not. And you're being an asshat if you talk about it like that.
Yeah. I agree.
I think it's a mistake to judge the merit of a book based solely on its genre, whether that genre is a publishing genre like young adult or a more specific genre like sci-fi or fantasy. You are going to miss out on a lot of really great stories by doing that. You are robbing yourself of experiences.
Yeah. The only thing I wanted to jump in and say before you get to this great last quote, because I agree with everything you said. The article, I didn't find it as judgy as the title sounded. Because the title, and it is, like, the title is a super clickbaity bullshit, like, you should be embarrassed to read young adult books, you adult. I'm like, no. Like, obviously no. And I think you summed it up perfectly. Read whatever you want, and don't judge people for reading what they read. Like, that's stupid.
Yeah, that's dumb. Don't do that.
But the point of the article, I thought, and again, I also think I agree with, and you didn't touch into this in here, but in the comments you were talking about how it did seem like the author had a rather limited idea of what young adult fiction is and the sort of themes and things it can do. But I think the ultimate point that she basically got to, you could distill the whole thing down to, like, it's a good idea to read a lot of different stuff, to get a lot of different, not that you have to, but that it is potentially a good idea to read a lot of things from a lot of different backgrounds with a wide-ranging messages and from different genres, because there's a lot to be had out there, and it can potentially, and now see, young adult's probably not even the right one to go to even try to make this point with, because it can cover so many different, because it's such a wide-ranging genre within itself, that it seems silly to me to say. Her point ultimately was, though, that some adult fiction gets into more like adult problems or adult themes, which maybe there's something to that, and it might be a good idea to occasionally go read another different type of book.
I agree with you that it's a good idea to read a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that. If you always read young adult romance, for example, maybe branch out a little bit.
Yeah.
See what else is out there. You might find something that you really like. Again, you don't have to. You're not required to. This isn't school.
Yeah. And you shouldn't be embarrassed ever for reading whatever you want to read. That's the dumb part of the article.
But it is a good idea to read a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I did find that article judgy.
I'm not saying it wasn't judgy, because it was. The line... Sorry, go ahead.
I see what you're saying, but to me, that element was maybe present, but it didn't seem like what that article distilled down to me.
That's kind of, I don't know. See, I got a different thing out of it. Maybe it's because I didn't feel personally attacked, but I don't know. So I was just like, yeah, read a lot of different stuff. Sure. Like but that's also, it's the same thing where when you can distill something down to that message, to me, that's like, well, that's not interesting. Of course, reading lots of different stuff is generally a good idea. In terms of educating yourself and learning and finding new interesting ideas and sure, but that's not, you don't have to write a whole article about it. Like, that doesn't mean anything. The sense that it's true, it's not novel. In the sense that it's novel, it's not true. The article as a whole, in the sense that it's true, reading lots of different stuff is a good idea. Generally speaking, lots of different ideas and different stories can be a good idea. That's true, sure. But that's not a novel idea.
No, it's not.
So then,
I don't think that was her point, because she wasn't telling us to read a lot of different things. She was specifically saying, don't read this specific thing.
No, see, I don't think she was, though. To me, it came across as you can read it, but also read some other stuff. But maybe that was just how I interpreted it. To me, it seemed like, and again, I agree that you shouldn't say, because what she did say is you shouldn't only read this. And again, you can get into an argument of whether or not somebody should do anything. No, you probably anybody can do whatever they want. If you only want to read young adult and literature, fucking go for it. I think her point was that if you branch out outside of that, there's other stuff you can find that is interesting that isn't just young adult. At least that's how I read it. And now, sure, it is. But again, to me, that's the thing where that's true to me, but that's not an interesting new, like, that's not a novel idea.
Well, no.
But then the thing that is novel about her thing is the idea that you should be embarrassed to read young adult, not literature, and that's not true. So, like, the part of it that is interesting isn't true. The part of it that's true isn't interesting. So, like, what's the point? It was kind of what it boiled
that's
down.
why I defined it as clickbait.
Yeah, well, it's 100%
It was
is.
very clickbaity.
100% is. I mean, she's a freelance journalist on the internet. Like, it's all clickbait.
Regardless, you don't need to knock on something to get your message across. Like there was no reason for her to go after young adult literature if her ultimate point was to say you should read a lot of different things. There's no reason for that other than I need clicks.
Right. Yes, because it makes a pithy headline that makes people go, what? And it happened. We all clicked on it. And then two, it very much felt like it was because it was a genre that she was not incredibly well informed on, or I say genre, like to where she boiled it down to sort of a handful of, and again, you can only give so many examples in an article, but like the examples she gave of like 3 popular books from the last 5 years, it's like, sure, okay.
And that was a big part of what irked me about the article, was that she came off as incredibly uninformed about young adult literature, and I just really think that if you're not at least moderately informed about something, you shouldn't blow smoke out of your ass about it. It's just how I feel about things.
Yeah, or at least not doing it. At least not do it in a judgmental way, or in a way where you tell people they should be embarrassed about it.
We're getting farther and farther away from my PSA here.
No, we aren't. That was I wanted to make that diversion in there because I don't know. I don't know if everybody read that article the same way you, but I can see. Well, I agree. So, but I agree with everything you said in here. So,
anyway, don't be a book snob. Don't be an anything snob. Really.
Yeah, that is 100% true.
Don't rob yourself of experiences. Don't try to rob other people of experiences. If you like young adult literature and you yourself are an adult, you don't need to feel ashamed about that.
No, that is a huge PSA I can get behind. I have such and this is a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. And it's a little ironic because I do make fun of things on the internet for a side living, but
you do it lovingly, though.
I try to do it lovingly and in a way that adds more joy to the world. I have a big problem with a lot of where online criticism, and especially like similar to stuff we do where it's making fun of or talking about stuff, a lot of times it feels like there's a lot of cynicism in that, and that is really gross to me, especially when it feels like it's trying to rob joy from other people. Like, I don't like that, and I try not to put that out into the world, but that's a big problem I have. So yeah, like the idea of not, you like whatever you like, and you can argue with other people about whether or not you think that thing's good, and that's fine, but like, I don't know, I have a big problem with the cynicism of trying, and especially when it's like the cynicism that creeps in and tries to somehow, for some reason, makes people feel like they need to pull the joy out of a thing for somebody else.
Don't rob yourself of joy.
Yeah.
Don't try to rob other people of joy. Read whatever you want. Read young adult literature, or don't.
Yeah.
Or do. It doesn't really matter.
No.
But I'm going to close us out here. I'm going to close out this PSA with one of my favorite quotes ever, from C.S. Lewis, who is the author of The Chronicles of Narnia. Critics who treat adult as a term of approval instead of as a merely descriptive term cannot be adult themselves. To be concerned about being grown up, to admire the grown up because it is grown up, to blush at the suspicion of being childish, these things are the marks of childhood and adolescence. And in childhood and adolescence, they are, in moderation, healthy symptoms. Young things ought to want to grow. But to carry on into middle life, or even into early manhood, this concern about being an adult is a mark of really arrested development. When I was 10, I read fairy tales in secret and would have been ashamed if I had been found doing so. Now that I am 50, I read them openly. When I become a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up.